inflation and the economy have continued to rank as the top issue for voters across the country. And it's no longer an issue where Trump or Republicans can point a finger to the Biden administration because they're not in office anymore. Now they own the economy.
Let's focus on Donald Trump, though, and welcome in Sabrina Siddiqui, who is the national politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal, who joins us tonight. Sabrina, good evening.
Good to be with you.
There's a great story, actually, as we look ahead to the midterms. We've been talking about the fact that it's the anniversary of the US and Israel joint war on Iran tomorrow, and what that means for increasing pressure surrounding Trump's popularity ahead of the midterms. And it seems he's lining up his excuses. Donald Trump's historically low popularity means that he could be preparing to blame his fellow Republicans in the GOP for a midterm massacre. Earlier this week, the president turned heads after resharing a month-old social media post from a loyal supporter who warned that Republicans were sleepwalking toward a midterm reckoning they don't see coming. Earlier in the summer, the president also explicitly warned his party that they'll lose the midterms if we are foolish, stupid and unwise. Is Trump getting in ahead of the action here? What do we know about the inevitability that the Republicans will take a battering in November?
Well, I think that's the expectation in part because even if you set aside for a moment the president's historically low approval ratings, midterms are often and typically a referendum on the incumbent president. And you just generally tend to see a sort of backlash toward the party that's currently in control of Washington. I think right now that's even more amplified because inflation and the economy have continued to rank as the top issue for voters across the country. And it's no longer an issue where Trump or Republicans can point a finger to the Biden administration because they're not in office anymore. Now they own the economy. And so I do think Republicans are very concerned that because Trump has struggled to really turn the economy around and people are still feeling like they're paying far too much for groceries and other bills and now for gas prices as prices have risen as well with the Iran war, that the GOP will be the one to blame when voters go to cast their ballots in November.
The writing up that I've been reading of this, talks about a very interesting intra-party clash at a particularly sensitive time, if indeed the Republicans lose control of either chamber, the Senate or the House. It sets up something of a confrontation, a reality within the party, doesn't it, that will need to be addressed. And how you address it, of course, that could translate in several different ways.
It can. And one thing that's going to, of course, be different about this particular midterm cycle is it's not just that President Trump is not on the ballot and that it's Republicans who are on the ballot. And in essence, of course, again, it's a referendum on the president. He's also not going to be on the ballot again, right? He's not seeking another term. Therefore, it's also teeing up the inevitable showdown that's going to happen in 2028 when you'll have, pretty much an open primary in both parties. And so I think, what you're going to see is a lot of hand-wringing, whatever happens in the midterms, to figure out, as both parties kind of chart what their future looks like, as they switch gears toward who's going to control the White House for the, beyond when Trump has to leave office. And I think that what's interesting about that is, you do have these tensions among Republicans, a lot of questions on what does a post-Trump Republican Party look like? Is it just the economy? Is it deeper than that? Are there other cultural divisions at play? But also you have a parallel fight unfolding among Democrats where you have this ongoing feud between the establishment and the socialists who have, of course, been pretty successful in the primaries thus far. So it's kind of a unique time, I think, in both parties in terms of what that means for the political climate moving ahead.
Yeah. Well, how would the GOP interpret Trump blaming them for its own losses? It's nothing to do with me. Trump is seeming to say it's on you.
I mean, I think that there'd be frustration. What we've seen in the past is that this party is Republicans within the party are very careful to not get on the president's bad side. They don't like to pick fights with him. They're generally pretty fearful of him because he still wields a lot of influence over the Republican electorate, right? So, he's not shied away from endorsing primary challengers for sitting Republican members of Congress. And so that's what can happen if, you kind of come out swinging, but at the same time, because Trump is not going to be on the ballot again, as I said, in 2028, there might be a little bit of a feeling within the party that they can perhaps liberate themselves from Trump a fair amount. I think they would probably argue that the White House is the one dictating policy, that the White House was the Trump administration was the one that chose to go to war with Iran. These are things that they've been more focused on foreign policy in general. Remember, we started out the year with the raid in Venezuela. These are decisions that were made by the Trump administration. At the same time, of course, Republicans in Congress also exist to enact legislation. So how much of that were they not doing because either they didn't have the votes, or they didn't think the president would sign it, or they couldn't come to consensus? I mean, I don't think they would be able to fully absolve themselves of blame either.
Let's move on to newly obtained documents that point towards the US Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy, lying in his Senate confirmation hearing when he told lawmakers that a 2019 visit to Samoa had nothing to do with vaccines. That's according to letters obtained by The Guardian and the Associated Press. One letter written by RFK Jr. to the Samoan Prime Minister before the trip shows Kennedy explicitly stating that he wanted to study the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine in the Pacific Island nation, using the words vaccine or vaccination 8 times. Here is Kennedy defending his trip during his confirmation hearing.
I went there, nothing to do with vaccines. I went there to introduce a medical informatics system that would digitalize records in Samoa and make health delivery much more efficient. I never gave any public statement about vaccines. You cannot find a single Samoan who will say, I didn't get a vaccine because of Bobby Kennedy. I went in June of 2019. The measles outbreak started in August.
Yeah, so he's saying there probably correctly that you won't find a single Samoan who didn't get a vaccine because of him. But the point is, it could be proven that he lied during his confirmation hearing here, and that covers it. That could produce a very harsh punishment, couldn't it?
It could, in theory. Now, the issue, of course, is that Republicans control the Senate. And so, are they willing to pick a fight with a cabinet official in the Trump administration? I do think, without question, the documents that were obtained by the Associated Press and The Guardian do paint a different picture from what Secretary Kennedy told the Senate, as you said. But what the Senate actually does about it, I think, is still an open-ended question. One thing I think that's notable is, what in his confirmation hearings, Secretary Kennedy had also, in essence, made certain promises that he was not going to try and reduce access to vaccines, that he wasn't really going to tamper with U.S. vaccine policy. And those are promises he made in order to get confirmed. And that was something that, of course, turned out to not be the case once he took office. He's taken all these steps to overhaul the recommendations for childhood vaccines. So there are examples of him already misleading Congress, and not much was done in response. But if Democrats were to take control of the Senate, since we were talking about midterms, then there could be a separate question of whether they look at this as just a contradiction, or do they look at it as an actual lie under oath and decide to do something with it.
Yeah, that is the question, of course. What is the picture like overall when it comes to Americans' attitude towards vaccines? Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s views are well known. He is known to be a skeptic. Some think he hasn't gone as far as he perhaps might have done, that he's dialed down some of the rhetoric around vaccines. But are his opinions and Donald Trump's opinions, do they have a real effect on the American public? Is there a tide turn away from vaccination as a direct result of some of these ideas?
Well, the polling in the U.S. does show that there is still overwhelming support for vaccines, especially childhood vaccines, which are generally the ones that are polled on, because those are the ones that are also required by schools. And those are the ones that are intended to prevent vaccine preventable illnesses from resurfacing. At the same time, you've had a measles outbreak in the U.S. that I will say the origins of which began before the Trump administration took office, but it's kind of coinciding with a decline in vaccination rates for certain diseases, and that includes the MMR vaccine. And I would say, while it has not dropped, by a substantial amount, just even dropping by a couple percentage points is a problem, because that's what's required, of course, to prevent these kinds of outbreaks. And certainly what most public health officials I speak to say is children should not be dying of the measles in 2025 or 2026 when this outbreak began. So it's more that there's concern that when there's a tone that's being set from the top, that certain vaccines aren't necessary. And certainly if the federal government is doing away with certain recommendations, as they're trying to do, just as of a few weeks ago, Trump signed an executive order on this very issue, then the concern is that more parents might try to opt out of required vaccines, that they might try to seek more exceptions, or that they might not give their children other routine vaccinations, and it might contribute to this climate of vaccine hesitancy that may still be a small group, but has been growing in recent years.
All right, let's talk about, there's a trade war ongoing between the United States and its northern neighbour, Canada. It shows no signs of resolution. In the last few hours, Donald Trump has signed an executive order renaming formerly Lake Ontario, Lake America. I actually said it would be this for a joke, Sabrina, and it's come to pass. Posting on his TikTok account, the president said this to accompany the announcement.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada and in the United States, but we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a Gulf. Because we have the Gulf of America, now we have Lake America, without the of.
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, Sabrina? And you can hear him signing the executive order in that clip. I mean, how has this been received?
I think it's not unlike when he made this shift last year to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And yes, the U.S. president can, at least from a federal standpoint, rename a body of water here in terms of how it may be referred to in federal documents. But that's not going to that's not necessarily going to change how people actually refer to that body of water, right? You don't just see people walking around the U.S. now saying Gulf of America. Most people still say Gulf of Mexico, and there are even local jurisdictions that have defied Trump on some of these efforts that have been similar in the past. But it's a sign of this escalating feud with Canada, which of course is over trade. I don't think that Canadian government officials are going to. I don't think you'll hear anyone in Canada embracing this name change or even giving it much thought. Yeah. It's rather than just seeing it as an effort by the president to escalate this ongoing trade war. I
wonder if they'll do anything in retaliation. I mean, what the clip actually showed Donald Trump with a map and a Sharpie. So rather than signing the executive order, he's literally just got his Sharpie out. And of course, he could do this for any body of water or landmark as he slowly tries to rename everything in America's name. Water off a duck's back, perhaps, to Canadians, but another provocative move by Donald Trump nonetheless. Sabrina, it's great to speak to you. Thank you for being with us. Sabrina Siddiqui, who's national politics reporter at the Wall Street Journal. We'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.